I learned something about fear the night Dominic Hayes looked across a rooftop full of millionaires and saw me before anyone else did. Rain tapped softly against the glass walls of the Avalon Rooftop Lounge, turning the Manhattan skyline into a watercolor blur of gold and silver light. From 32 floors above Fifth Avenue, the city looked clean. Beautiful. Like bad things only happen somewhere far below us. I adjusted the strap of my black serving apron and balanced a tray of sparkling water between my palms, weaving carefully through clusters of wealthy guests who smelled like expensive perfume and old money. Friday nights at Avalon always felt like theater. Women in silk dresses laughed too loudly. Men in tailored suits shook hands like business deals were sacred rituals. Everyone pretending they belonged to some perfect version of New York. I definitely didn't. At 26, I was working double shifts 6 nights a week just to keep my studio apartment in Queens and make minimum payments on student loans that barely moved no matter how hard I worked. My feet hurt. My shoulders ached. And the only thing waiting for me after midnight was cold leftover takeout and 4 hours of sleep before another shift. Emily. My manager's sharp voice cut through the music. VIP section needs another bottle of Pellegrino. Table 3. I nodded automatically. Got it. The VIP section sat near the far end of the rooftop behind smoked glass partitions and velvet ropes no normal customer was allowed to cross. Avalon attracted celebrities, hedge fund guys, athletes, and sometimes people no one named out loud. The kind of men security watched without seeming obvious about it. I grabbed the bottle from the bar and headed toward the section, trying not to stare at the crowd gathered there. That was when someone slid a crystal glass onto my tray. For you, a smooth male voice said. I turned toward a man in an ivory suit leaning casually against the marble bar. Maybe early 30s. Blonde hair slicked back perfectly. Smile too practiced to feel sincere. I think you've earned a break tonight. The drink looked harmless. Sparkling water with lime. Condensation rolled slowly down the side of the glass. I can't drink while working, I said politely. Manager's orders. Then save it for later. His smile widened slightly. You look exhausted. I should have walked away right then. Something about him felt off in a way I couldn't explain. But the rooftop was packed, my shift had already hit 9 hours, and honestly, I was thirsty enough to ignore my instincts. Thanks, I muttered. He gave a small nod and disappeared back into the crowd before I could say anything else. I delivered the Pellegrino to the VIP table and tried not to notice the men seated there. One of them sat slightly apart from the others, silent while everyone else talked around him. Dark charcoal suit. Broad shoulders. Black watch glinting beneath the low amber lighting. He didn't laugh. Didn't move much. But people watched him carefully when they spoke, like his opinion mattered more than oxygen. I lowered my eyes quickly and stepped away from the table. My pulse picked up for reasons I didn't understand. Back near the service station, I finally took a sip from the glass. Cold bubbles slid down my throat. Lime. Clean. Refreshing. I drank again. Then again. 10 minutes later, the floor tilted beneath my feet. At first, I thought exhaustion had finally caught up with me. The music deepened strangely, bass vibrating through my ribs harder than before. The lights overhead smeared into streaks of white and gold every time I blinked. I grabbed the edge of the bar quietly, hoping nobody noticed. My breathing slowed unnaturally. Wrong. Something was wrong. I reached for my phone inside my apron pocket, but my fingers suddenly felt numb. Across the rooftop, the man in the ivory suit was watching me. Smiling again. And for the first time all night, real fear crawled down my spine. Then someone else stood up from the VIP table. The entire atmosphere of the room changed before I even looked at him. The man rose from the VIP table with the kind of calm that made everyone else instinctively move out of his way. I did not know his name yet, but the second he stood up, conversations around the rooftop softened like people suddenly remembered how loud they were being. He was tall. Maybe 6'3". Dark hair brushed neatly away from a face that looked too composed to belong in a place like this. His charcoal suit fit perfectly across broad shoulders, and there was something cold about the way he moved. Not cruel. Controlled. Like he never wasted energy on unnecessary motion. My vision blurred again before I could look away. The room tipped hard to the left, forcing me to grip the edge of the marble counter tighter. The music from the speakers sounded underwater now. Slow. Distorted. My heartbeat dragged strangely inside my chest. Panic crawled up my throat. Something had been in that drink. Easy there. The voice beside me belonged to the man in the ivory suit. He appeared at my elbow so smoothly it made my skin prickle. You look like you need some air. His hand settled lightly against my back. I flinched immediately. I am fine, I whispered, though even I could hear how weak I sounded. I just need a minute. Of course. His smile never reached his eyes. I already called a car for you. My stomach dropped. I never asked for a car. I tried reaching for my phone again, but my fingers refused to cooperate. The screen slipped from my hand and clattered against the floor near the bar stools. The sound felt louder than the music. Embarrassingly loud. A few people glanced over before quickly pretending not to notice. Nobody wanted involvement. Nobody ever did in places like Avalon. Let me help you, the man in ivory said softly. His fingers tightened slightly on my arm. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to guide. Control. Every survival instinct inside me screamed awake. No, I managed. I can go myself. The rooftop light smeared again when I tried to step backward. My knees nearly buckled beneath me. He caught my wrist before I hit the floor. Careful, he murmured. You are confused right now. Fear hit me fully then. Sharp and freezing. I opened my mouth to speak louder, but the words tangled uselessly behind my teeth. Across the rooftop, I saw movement. The dark-haired man from the VIP section was walking toward us now. Not rushed. Not angry. Somehow that made it worse. The men around him immediately stepped aside as he passed. Security guards near the elevator straightened without being asked. Even the bartenders suddenly found reasons to look somewhere else. The man in ivory noticed him too. I felt it in the way his grip shifted uneasily against my wrist. This is private, he called out, forcing a casual laugh. The dark-haired man stopped 3 feet away from us. Up close, he looked even more dangerous. Not because of size or intimidation. Because his eyes were completely steady. Gray. Cold as winter rain against concrete. They flicked once toward my face, then down to the glass still sitting abandoned near the bar. One look. That was all it took. He understood everything. Let her go, he said quietly. The rooftop seemed to shrink around those 4 words. The man in ivory straightened defensively. She is leaving with me. The dark-haired man stepped closer. Not fast. Not threatening. Certain. Touch her again, he said calmly, and you are dead. Silence crashed over the rooftop so suddenly I could hear the rain against the windows again. Even through the haze in my head, I felt the shift in the room. Fear. Real fear. But not mine. The man holding my wrist released me immediately. I stumbled sideways, dizzy enough that I nearly fell again. Before I hit the floor, strong hands caught my shoulders carefully, steadying me without pulling me close. Look at me, the dark-haired man said. His voice remained low and controlled, but something underneath it softened slightly when I blinked up at him. Can you tell me your name? Emily, I whispered. Emily Carter. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. Good, he said quietly. Stay awake for me, Emily. The first thing I noticed was that he smelled like rain and cedar instead of alcohol and smoke like most men at Avalon. The second was that his hands never tightened more than necessary as he steadied me. Controlled. Precise. Like he was constantly aware of his own strength. My vision drifted in and out around the edges while the rooftop lights blurred above us. Somewhere behind him, the man in the ivory suit tried forcing another nervous laugh. Dominic, come on, he said. You are misunderstanding the situation. Dominic. The name moved. Through the rooftop like a warning siren whispered under people's breath. I felt it immediately. Bartenders suddenly looked down at their counters. Two men near the elevator stepped backward without being asked. Even in my half-conscious state, I could feel fear spreading through the room like cold water beneath a locked door. Dominic Hayes did not look away from me. Can you stand? He asked quietly. I swallowed hard. I think so. The second I tried, my knees betrayed me again. A wave of dizziness crashed through my body so violently my stomach twisted. Dominic caught me before I hit the marble floor, one hand firm against my back while the other steadied my arm. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing possessive. Somehow that almost made me trust him more. Easy, he murmured. Do not fight it. She probably drank too much, the man in ivory interrupted quickly. I was trying to help her downstairs. Dominic finally turned toward him. The temperature in the rooftop lounge seemed to drop 10 degrees. What did she drink? He asked. The question sounded calm. Too calm. The man hesitated for half a second too long. I do not know. Whatever the bar served her. Dominic glanced once toward the abandoned crystal glass near the counter. Then toward one of the security guards standing nearby. Seal the bar, he said. Nobody argued. Nobody even blinked. 3 men in black suits moved immediately through the crowd, speaking quietly into earpieces while guests began exchanging nervous looks. Panic buzzed softly beneath the music now. Something serious was happening, and everybody could feel it. The man in ivory took a careful step backward. This is unnecessary. Dominic's expression never changed. Your mistake, he said softly, was assuming nobody important would notice her. Important. The word wrapped strangely around my chest through the haze clouding my brain. I was nobody. A waitress working extra shifts for rent money. Yet Dominic Hayes looked at me like I mattered enough to stop an entire rooftop full of wealthy strangers. I struggled to breathe evenly. I need air. You are getting out of here, Dominic said immediately. He shrugged off his charcoal suit. Jacket and draped it carefully over my shoulders. The fabric felt warm from his body heat. Expensive. Heavy. Safe. My fingers clutched the edges instinctively as another dizzy wave rolled through me. Do you trust me enough to walk with me? He asked. The question stunned me almost as much as the drug flooding my system. Men who wanted control usually did not ask permission. They took it. I looked up at him, trying desperately to focus on his face through the blur. Gray eyes. Calm. Watching me carefully like he was waiting for an answer that actually mattered. Yes, I whispered. Something unreadable flickered across his expression before disappearing again. He guided me slowly toward the private elevator near the back of the rooftop while security quietly blocked anyone from following. I could feel eyes tracking us across the lounge. Curious. Nervous. Afraid. The man in ivory suddenly spoke again behind us, louder this time. You are making a mistake over some waitress. Dominic stopped walking. The entire rooftop froze with him. Slowly, he turned his head just enough for his voice to carry across the room without rising above a normal tone. No, he said. The mistake was touching her at all. Silence followed us all the way into the elevator. The doors closed softly behind us, shutting out the music, the lights, and every staring face on that rooftop. For the first time all night, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. The elevator moved silently downward, smooth enough that I barely felt it beneath my feet. I leaned against the mirrored wall, clutching Dominic's jacket tighter around my shoulders while my heartbeat thudded unevenly inside my chest. The drug still blurred everything at the edges. Light stretched too long. Sounds echoed strangely. But inside that elevator, one thing felt terrifyingly clear. Dominic Hayes was dangerous. Not in the loud way men at bars tried to be dangerous. Not with shouting or reckless behavior. His danger sat underneath the surface. Controlled. Patient. The kind that made other people obey before he even spoke. He stood beside the elevator doors with one hand in his pocket, watching the floor numbers change while speaking. Quietly into an earpiece I had not even noticed before. "Nobody leaves Avalon," he said calmly. "Especially not Nathan Whitmore." Nathan. The name clicked through my foggy thoughts. Ivory suit. Perfect smile. "The drink is already being tested," another voice answered faintly through the earpiece. Dominic's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "Good." I swallowed hard. "You know him?" My voice sounded small in the enclosed elevator. Dominic looked toward me fully for the first time since we left the rooftop. "Unfortunately." "Who is he?" For a second, I thought he might ignore the question. Instead, he said quietly, "Someone who has spent too much of his life believing consequences belong to other people." The elevator doors opened into a private underground parking level lined with black SUVs polished so perfectly they reflected the fluorescent ceiling lights like mirrors. Men in dark suits stood near the vehicles, alert but silent. Every one of them straightened slightly the moment Dominic stepped out. Nobody looked surprised to see him. But several glanced toward me with open concern. Not judgment. Concern. That almost unsettled me more. Dominic guided me slowly toward the nearest SUV. My legs still felt unreliable beneath me. "I do not want a hospital," I whispered quickly. The idea hit me all at once. Questions. Police. Tests. Embarrassment. My stomach twisted painfully. "Emily." Dominic stopped beside the vehicle and lowered his voice. "Look at me." I forced myself to lift my eyes toward his. "You were drugged," he said carefully. "You are not in trouble. But I need to make sure you are safe." Safe. The word cracked something open inside my chest. I had spent so much of my life handling things alone that hearing someone say safe almost hurt more than fear itself. "I cannot afford hospital bills," I admitted quietly. "I barely afford rent." Something dark flickered across his face then. "Anger maybe. Not at me. You are not paying for anything tonight." Before I could answer, another wave of dizziness hit hard enough to force me sideways. Dominic caught me immediately, steadying me with frustrating ease. "Breathe slowly," he murmured. "You are doing fine." Fine. I almost laughed at that. My brain felt wrapped in static. My skin alternated between freezing and overheated every few seconds. Somewhere nearby, rain tapped steadily against the concrete entrance ramp leading to the street above. Dominic opened the SUV door himself instead of letting one of the guards do it. "I have a physician waiting," he said. "Female. You can refuse anything you do not want." The fact that he clarified female before I even asked made my throat tighten unexpectedly. He noticed things. Small things. The kind most people ignored. "Why are you helping me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Dominic paused. Rain-scented air drifted through the parking garage while distant traffic hummed somewhere far above us. "Because someone should have," he said quietly. Those 6 words landed harder than they should have. My eyes burned suddenly, exhaustion and adrenaline colliding all at once. I looked away before he could notice. One of the guards approached carefully from across the garage. "Sir," he said low enough that I almost missed it. "Whitmore's father is calling." Dominic's entire expression changed. Not dramatic. Worse. Everything warm vanished from his face at once, replaced by something cold enough to make the guard straighten instinctively. "Ignore it," Dominic said. "For now." Then he looked back at me, and somehow the coldness disappeared again just as quickly. "Get in the car, Emily," he said softly. "I promise nobody is touching you tonight." Manhattan looked different through the tinted windows of Dominic Hayes's SUV. Softer somehow. The city lights blurred across the rain-streaked glass while traffic drifted past in glowing rivers of red and white. I sat curled against the leather seat with his jacket wrapped tightly around me, trying to stay conscious while exhaustion dragged at my body like heavy water. The inside of the vehicle smelled faintly of cedar, expensive cologne, and rain-soaked wool. Quiet. Controlled. Even the engine sounded smooth enough to lull me asleep if fear had not kept my nerves burning awake. Dominic sat across from me instead of beside me. That detail mattered more than he probably realized. He was giving me space on purpose. One of the security men drove while another occupied the front passenger seat, speaking quietly into a phone every few minutes. Dominic remained silent most of the ride, occasionally glancing toward me like he was checking whether I was still awake. "What happens now?" I asked eventually. My voice sounded rough. "You rest," he answered simply. "And tomorrow?" His gray eyes lifted toward mine. "Tomorrow depends on what you want." I frowned weakly. People like you do not usually ask what other people want. The corner of his mouth shifted slightly. Not quite a smile. People like me usually do not get told no often enough. Despite everything, a tired laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Dominic looked almost surprised by the sound. Then his expression softened for half a second in a way that completely changed his face. Less dangerous. More human. It vanished almost immediately. The SUV turned beneath a covered entrance lined with marble columns and private security. Not a hotel. Something quieter. More exclusive. A man opened the vehicle door the second we stopped, but Dominic lifted one hand sharply before the guard could offer assistance toward me. "Not her," he said calmly. The guard stepped back immediately. Dominic looked at me instead. "Can you walk?" "Probably not gracefully." "Grace is unnecessary." He offered his hand then. Nothing more. Just an open hand waiting patiently in the space between us. I hesitated for one heartbeat before placing my fingers against his palm. Warm. Steady. He helped me from the SUV carefully, keeping enough distance that I never felt trapped against him. Inside, the building glowed with soft golden lighting and quiet classical music drifting through hidden speakers. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers overhead. Everything looked impossibly expensive, but strangely empty. No crowded lobby. No strangers staring. Just silence and security. A woman in navy scrubs waited near the elevators holding a medical bag. Maybe late 40s. Blonde hair pulled into a clean ponytail. Calm blue eyes. Relief loosened something inside my chest immediately. "Emily?" she asked gently. "I am Dr. Kaplan." Dominic stepped back slightly, giving her space beside me instead. "You are safe here," she said quietly. "I just need to examine you and make sure your system clears the sedative normally." Sedative. Hearing the word out loud made my stomach twist again. This was real. Somebody had done this intentionally. Dr. Kaplan noticed my expression immediately. "You did nothing wrong," she said softly. "Do you understand me?" My throat tightened unexpectedly. I nodded once because speaking suddenly felt impossible. The private elevator doors opened beside us. Dominic remained near the entrance instead of following immediately. "I will stay outside while the doctor checks on you," he said. "You do not need to worry." "You trust her?" I asked quietly. "With my life," he answered without hesitation. Something about the certainty in his voice settled my nerves more than it should have. Upstairs, the apartment looked less like a home and more like something from an architectural magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked rain-soaked Manhattan. Dark wood. Soft lighting. Clean lines. Expensive without trying too hard. But what caught my attention most was what the apartment did not feel like. It did not feel threatening. Dr. Kaplan guided me toward a bedroom while Dominic stopped near the doorway. "Emily," he said suddenly. I turned back slowly. For the first time all night, he looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like something about tonight had scraped against an old wound beneath his carefully controlled exterior. "Nobody enters this floor without my permission," he said quietly. "You have my word." Then, before I could answer, Dominic Hayes stepped backward and closed the bedroom door himself from the outside. I woke up to silence so complete it took me several seconds to remember where I was. Soft gray morning light spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows across dark hardwood floors and cream-colored walls. Rain still drifted outside over Manhattan, turning the skyline silver beneath heavy clouds. For one terrifying second, panic punched through my chest. Strange room. Strange bed. Fragments of the rooftop slammed back into my memory all at once. The drink. The dizziness. Nathan Whitmore's hand on my wrist. Dominic Hayes standing between us like the entire city answered to him. I sat up too quickly and immediately regretted it. My head throbbed hard enough to force me back against the pillows. A glass of water and 2 aspirin rested neatly on the bedside table beside a folded note written in precise handwriting. For the headache. The medication should fully clear your system within a few hours. Dr. Kaplan. Relief loosened my breathing slightly. I looked down at myself. Clean oversized t-shirt. Sweatpants. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing missing. Another knot inside my chest quietly unraveled. Someone had taken care of me without taking advantage of me. That realization felt strangely emotional after the night I had survived. The apartment remained quiet beyond the bedroom door. Too quiet. I slid carefully from the bed and padded barefoot across the floor, clutching the edge of Dominic's borrowed shirt around myself. My own clothes had been neatly folded on a chair nearby, cleaned and pressed. Even my phone sat charging beside them. Battery full. No missed calls from work yet. It was barely 7 in the morning. I opened the bedroom door slowly. The apartment beyond looked even larger in daylight. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined one wall beside modern artwork and dark steel accents. Everything felt sharp and expensive without looking showy. Controlled, just like him. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air. My stomach tightened unexpectedly. Dominic stood near the kitchen island with his back partially turned toward me, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms while steam rose from a black coffee mug in his hand. Morning light cut across his profile, softening the harder edges of his face. Without the suit jacket and crowded rooftop around him, he looked different somehow. Still intimidating. But tired. Like he had not slept at all. He glanced up the second he heard me. "How is your head?" he asked quietly. I blinked. "You are making coffee." One corner of his mouth moved faintly. A tragic flaw, apparently. His calmness threw me off balance more than anger would have. I stepped cautiously into the kitchen. "Area. Did you sleep?" "No," the honesty of the answer surprised me. Dominic set the mug down carefully. "Dr. Kaplan said your vitals remained stable through the night. You stayed awake because of me?" "Yes." The word landed with uncomfortable weight between us. I folded my arms tighter across myself. Why? Dominic studied me for a long moment before answering. Because I have seen what happens when nobody pays attention soon enough. Something dark moved behind his gray eyes then. Old pain maybe. Regret. It disappeared before I could fully understand it. My phone buzzed softly against the kitchen counter where someone had placed it beside a fresh cup of tea. A text from my manager lit the screen. Where are you? Police came to Avalon this morning. My stomach dropped instantly. Police? Dominic remained calm. Nathan Whitmore's drink tested positive. I stared at him. You already know. I knew before sunrise. Of course he did. Men like Dominic Hayes probably learned everything before the rest of the city even woke up. I rubbed my temples slowly. What happens now? His expression hardened slightly. That depends on whether Nathan's family decides to protect him. And if they do? Silence stretched for half a second too long. Dangerous silence. Dominic finally lifted his coffee again without breaking eye contact. Then they become my problem too. The word should have terrified me. Instead, what unsettled me most was the complete certainty in his voice. Like there had never been another possible outcome from the moment he saw me struggling at that rooftop bar. I looked away first, suddenly aware that Dominic Hayes had not touched me once without permission all night. In a world full of powerful men, somehow that felt more dangerous than anything else. By noon, the rain finally stopped, but the heaviness inside the apartment remained. I stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around a mug of untouched tea while Manhattan moved below us in restless gray motion. Yellow taxis crawled through wet streets. Steam drifted from rooftops. Somewhere out there, people were heading to work, buying coffee, living normal lives. Meanwhile I was standing inside Dominic Hayes's private penthouse trying to understand why one terrifying night had changed everything so fast. Dominic sat across the room at a long black dining table, reading documents from a tablet while two men in dark suits spoke quietly beside him. Neither man looked comfortable delivering whatever news they had brought. The Whitmores are denying everything, one of them said carefully. Nathan claims she accepted the drink willingly. My stomach twisted instantly. Dominic did not react outwardly. Somehow that felt worse. Security footage, he asked. Missing from the rooftop between 11:22 and 11:31. Silence settled over the room. One of the men shifted uneasily beneath it. Avalon's owner says there was a system malfunction. Dominic finally looked up from the tablet. Gray eyes cold enough to freeze the air between all of us. And you believed him? No, sir. Good. His voice stayed calm, but tension pulled tight beneath every word now. I realized then why people feared him so much. Dominic never needed to yell. The danger lived in how controlled he remained while everyone else lost composure around him. One of the men noticed me standing near the windows and immediately lowered his voice. Dominic followed his gaze toward me. The coldness in his expression softened slightly the second our eyes met. Leave us, he told them quietly. Both men disappeared without argument. I stared at him after the apartment doors closed. You do not have to hide things from me. Dominic leaned back slowly in his chair. I am trying not to drag you deeper into this world. Too late for that. My voice came out sharper than intended. Police came to my job. A wealthy family is already covering for their son. And somehow everybody in Manhattan seems terrified of you. A faint shadow crossed his face. They should be. The honesty of the answer stole my next breath. Dominic stood and crossed the apartment toward me with measured steps, stopping several feet away instead of invading my space. Nathan Whitmore is not just some reckless rich kid, he said quietly. His father controls shipping contracts through half the eastern seaboard. Politicians owe him favors. Judges attend his charity dinners. Men like him survive because powerful people decide consequences are inconvenient. And you? I asked before I could stop myself. What are you? The question lingered heavily between us. Dominic looked out toward the skyline for several seconds before answering. Someone who learned a long time ago that laws protect the right people. There it was again. That glimpse beneath the surface. Old bitterness carefully hidden beneath control and expensive suits. My chest tightened unexpectedly. So what happens now? Dominic's jaw flexed once. Nathan disappears into rehab for 6 months. His lawyers issue statements about stress and mental health. His father donates money to the right organizations. And everyone moves on, I finished quietly. That is usually how these stories end. Anger rose hot in my throat then. Not explosive anger. Worse. Exhausted anger. The kind women carried every day because the world kept teaching us survival mattered more than justice. I do not want revenge, I whispered. Dominic looked at me carefully. What do you want? I swallowed hard. I want one night of my life to stop feeling like it belongs to people more powerful than me. Something shifted in his expression then. Not pity. Respect. Real respect. He stepped closer slowly, close enough that I could see faint exhaustion beneath his eyes for the first time. Emily, he said quietly, look at me. I did. Nobody owns what happened to you except you. The words hit harder than comfort should have. My eyes burned suddenly, and I hated that he noticed immediately. Dominic glanced away first, almost giving me privacy inside my own emotions. Nathan Whitmore made one mistake last night, he said softly. He chose a woman who still knows her own worth. For the first time since Avalon, I felt something stronger than fear settle inside my chest. That evening, the city glowed gold beneath the penthouse windows while thunder rolled somewhere far beyond the Hudson River. I stood alone near the kitchen island staring down at my phone for almost 10 straight minutes before finally pressing play on the voicemail Avalon management had left me. Earlier. Emily, we are placing you on temporary leave while the investigation continues. Temporary leave. Corporate language for inconvenience. Liability. Replaceable. I deleted the message without listening twice. Across the apartment, Dominic watched me quietly from the living room. He had changed back into another dark suit sometime during the afternoon, looking once again like the version of himself the rest of Manhattan feared. But after seeing him exhausted in the kitchen that morning, after hearing the restraint beneath his anger, the image felt incomplete now. There was more to him than power and cold control. That realization unsettled me more than it should have. You should eat something, he said softly. I am not hungry. That was not a suggestion. I looked up sharply, ready to argue, but the corner of his mouth shifted faintly before I could respond. Dry humor. Unexpected. You always order people around like this? I asked. Usually they obey faster. Despite myself, another small laugh escaped me. Dominic noticed immediately. His expression changed in a way I still could not fully understand whenever I laughed around him. Softer. Like some invisible tension inside him loosened for a second. Then his phone rang. Everything changed instantly. He glanced at the screen once before answering. What? Silence stretched while someone spoke on the other end. I watched Dominic's posture stiffen slowly. Not dramatic. Dangerous. Who authorized that statement? He asked quietly. Another pause. Then tell Arthur Whitmore his son's reputation stopped mattering the second he touched her drink. My chest tightened hearing the words spoken out loud. Dominic listened for several more seconds before ending the call without another word. What happened? I asked carefully. He set the phone down on the counter harder than necessary. Nathan's family is blaming you. I stared at him. What? They are claiming you targeted him intentionally for money. The room went completely still around me. Heat flooded my face instantly. Humiliation. Anger. Exhaustion. Of course they are. Dominic watched me carefully while I tried forcing my breathing steady again. They released the statement to several media contacts 30 minutes ago. And now what? My voice cracked despite my effort to control it. Now you destroy them. The silence that followed scared me more than yelling would have. Dominic stepped toward the windows overlooking Manhattan, hands sliding into his pockets while the storm outside deepened across the skyline. I can end Arthur Whitmore's entire empire by tomorrow morning, he said quietly. Shipping contracts vanish. Accounts freeze. Politicians stop returning calls. Men like him survive because everyone profits from pretending they are untouchable. There it was again. That terrifying level of certainty. He was not bluffing. Men like Dominic Hayes probably could erase lives without ever raising their voice. No, the word left my mouth before I fully thought it through. Dominic turned slowly toward me. No. Do not do it because of me. His gray eyes narrowed slightly. Emily. Listen to me. I stepped closer before my courage disappeared. I do not want to become another reason powerful men destroy each other. Dominic's jaw tightened. They tried to destroy you first. And if you burn everything down for revenge, then what? I asked softly. What does that make you? The question landed hard between us. For several seconds, Dominic said nothing at all. Thunder rumbled faintly outside while city lights flickered across the windows behind him. He looked suddenly exhausted again. Older somehow beneath all the control. You think I do not know what I am? He asked quietly. I think you are trying very hard not to become worse. His expression shifted then. Small. Almost invisible. But real. Like nobody had spoken to him honestly in a very long time. I swallowed hard and held his gaze anyway. Do not punish Nathan Whitmore because you own this city, I whispered. Punish him because I still belong to myself. The silence afterward felt enormous. Dominic stared at me like I had just said something dangerous enough to change both our lives. Then slowly, for the first time since I met him, he lowered his eyes before I did. 3 days later, Manhattan woke up to headlines nobody expected. Not about me. Not about Dominic Hayes. About Nathan Whitmore. Anonymous footage from Avalon appeared online overnight showing security staff quietly escorting visibly disoriented women out of private VIP sections over the past year. Former employees began speaking anonymously to reporters before breakfast. By noon, 2 investors had publicly withdrawn from Arthur Whitmore's companies. By evening, Avalon's liquor license was under review and Nathan Whitmore's face had disappeared from every social media account connected to his family. Dominic never admitted he orchestrated any of it. He did not need to. The city understood anyway. I sat near the penthouse windows reading the headlines on my phone while rainless sunlight finally spilled across Manhattan for the first time since that night. Strange how quickly powerful people abandon someone once protecting him became inconvenient. Dominic stood several feet away near the bar, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms while he read messages from his tablet with the same calm expression he wore for everything else. You destroyed them without touching them, I said quietly. He glanced up once. Truth is expensive in this city. Did you leak the footage? Dominic took a slow sip of coffee before answering. I made sure the right people stopped burying it. Typical. Half confession. Half warning. I should have been afraid of him. Maybe part of me still was. But another part understood something now that I had missed on the rooftop. Dominic Hayes did not enjoy destruction. He simply knew exactly how to survive in a world built by dangerous men. My phone buzzed softly again. Another message from Avalon Management. This one sounded very different from the first voicemail. Emily, we deeply regret the situation and would like to discuss your return along with compensation for emotional distress. I almost laughed. Amazing, I muttered. They suddenly discovered morality. Dominic's mouth curved faintly. Fear often improves ethics. I looked toward him over the edge of my phone. Was this your version of restraint? You asked me not to burn the city down. And you listened? Something unreadable flickered across his expression then. You are the first person who has asked me to stop instead of demanding I go further. The honesty in his voice hit unexpectedly hard. Silence settled softly between us after that. Not awkward. Just real. Outside the windows, Manhattan glowed gold beneath late afternoon sunlight while traffic crawled through streets still wet from days of rain. Life continuing like always. Except I no longer felt like the same woman who walked into Avalon carrying trays and apologizing for taking up space. Dominic crossed the room slowly and stopped beside the windows near me. Close enough that I could feel his presence. Far enough that I still had room to breathe. Dr. Kaplan cleared you this morning, he said quietly. You are free to leave whenever you want. The words should have relieved me immediately. Instead, something complicated twisted beneath my ribs. Because for the first time in years, someone had protected me without asking for ownership in return. I set my phone down carefully. Do you always let people walk away this easily? Dominic looked out across the skyline instead of at me. No, the single word carried too much truth inside it. My chest tightened. Then why me? He stayed silent for several seconds. Because if I tried to keep you here, he said quietly, you would stop being yourself. I stared at him then. Really stared. At the exhaustion hidden beneath his control. The loneliness beneath the power. Dominic Hayes could command rooms full of dangerous men with one sentence, but somehow he looked uncertain standing beside me in the afternoon light. And maybe that was the moment everything shifted. Not on the rooftop. Not in the elevator. Here. In silence. I spent most of my life thinking powerful people only protected things they owned, I admitted softly. Dominic's eyes met mine finally. Gray. Steady. Human. And now? I smiled faintly despite myself. Now I think some people are just tired of watching good things get hurt. Something warm moved through his expression so briefly I almost missed it. Then I stepped closer and handed his suit jacket back to him for the first time since Avalon. His fingers brushed mine carefully as he took it. Not possessive. Not demanding. Just there. Outside, the city kept moving beneath the setting sun. But for the first time in a very long time, I did not feel small inside it anymore.